How can we manage this? Let's send them on a training course. How many times have you heard a comment of this nature when people are referring to the traits or behaviour of someone in a leadership role, and not even 3 months later it's like nothing's ever happened? Anything that the participant has learnt has been forgotten, cast aside, or even worse, they've left the company. My name's David Cooman and I'm an executive and leadership coach and consultant, and I work with leaders just like you to understand the relationship between your choices, your behaviours, and ultimately your success. Now, before you assume that my message is a critique of leadership development, let me be clear, training programs are an incredibly valuable use of time and resources. When the development being undertaken is appropriate for that person, their role, and the gaps in their capabilities, and now listen to this, when they actually want to be trained in that particular space. To pursue training when these criteria are not being met will ultimately see that your investment is wasted, either because that person simply doesn't use the resources they've been given, or they actively reject the training because they simply don't want to be there. What I'm talking about is a scenario where a changed person returns to an unchanged environment and they continue old behaviours or leave. What do I mean by changed? When you think about leadership, there are a number of behaviours that we hope our leaders will possess. When you're privileged to work with a great leader, you see many or all of these different behaviours demonstrated. Do you think they just knew how to lead? No, the data on this is clear. Leaders possess a natural ability which flourishes through a process of their own personal learning, reflection, and development through training, mentoring, and coaching. The hope for any investment in a person is that they embrace what they're learning, take it on board, and reflect on their own behaviours and change the way they behave and show up. So as people are developed, the complexity of their thinking, their attitudes, values, beliefs, and behaviours are changed. And your hope in sending someone to a development program is that they'd bring that change back to the workplace. Because that's what you originally intended, right? Create change in the person and subsequently the environment. And yet, so many people returning from that kind of development don't bring the change back, or at least not for the long term. Which brings me to my comment of the unchanged environment. People operate in an environment over time, and one of two things happens. Either they shape their environment or the environment shapes them. What do I mean by that? Well, some institutions and organisations develop over a long time, and sometimes this happens quickly. What's true is that they become the sum total of the dominant beliefs, attitudes, behaviours, and personalities that exist there. This becomes the norm, and it drives how the business operates and its culture. When people work in an organisation in a pursuit of success and achievement, they become influenced by their surroundings and they become a product of that environment. This influence can be positive and sometimes not so positive. People adapt to their surroundings and their attitudes and behaviours adapt to those environments as well. They learn to do what they need to do to flourish and belong or break free. So what happens? When you bring a changed person back to an unchanged environment, the forces of the environment, existing culture, dominant personalities and behaviours, immediately begin to apply pressure. The new learnings that they'd undertaken are put to the test, and without the right support, those new learnings will give way to the same pressure that existed before, and you see new learning sidelined and old behaviours show up. Now, you may be thinking this not isolated to organisations, but also true of communities, families, in friendships and relationships, and you'd be right. Long-held attitudes and beliefs within a group can be a challenge to change. I remember watching the largely forgettable movie The Godfather 3, and my favourite quote from that movie was from an older Michael Corleone played by Al Pacino. "Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in." Michael's doing everything he can to go straight, to change his behaviour, but his community kept a firm grip on him and pulling him back to his old ways and his old behaviours. It's because of this that one of the common lessons in a lot of personal development programs is about holding yourself to a higher standard. You may have heard someone say it like this: you are the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Or proximity is power. What about this one? When your friends aren't challenging, you get better friends. And possibly my favourite, if you were the smartest person in the room, you're hanging out in the wrong room. Any way you look at it, someone that has undergone development and that is returning to a space that will not support that development will revert back to old behaviours or find the right room to hang out in. So what can you do to ensure that learning and subsequent behaviours stick? Well, it depends on the type of change you're pursuing. Is it organisational, cultural, individual growth that you're aiming at? The answer is support, and the type of support will depend on the level of change you wish to undertake. Undertaking a change program to implement learning on a large scale is ideal when, as an organisation, you're pursuing a broad adoption of a set of skills, behaviours and values. Only when supported by a strong degree of influence or control does the widely accepted normal become open to change. Broad change requires support at the senior leadership level of an organisation or department. I worked with an organisation to redefine leadership. This endeavour was championed by the executive and the direct leadership team. The progress would not have been made possible if it wasn't for this level of transparency and commitment from the entire leadership team, not just lip service to the idea. And it was underpinned by both individual and team coaching and mentoring to ensure the change was adopted throughout the organisation. This type of change work is typically related to a behaviour or skill set that's lacking or needing development for an individual. This may be a subsequent aspect of a larger program of change as mentioned previously, or it may be an individual development activity. An individual is at risk of dismissing everything that they've learnt in their return to the environment if they're going along to get along. Another way you might look at it is if they're hesitant to rock the boat. Individual change can have a lower degree of success over the long term unless the development has the support of that person's direct and won-over leader. And if they don't have the right support through strong leadership, coaching and mentoring, you can expect that your investment is not going to see the return that you'd hoped. The mentoring and coaching required must create a structured approach to enable the continued application of skills until it becomes the new norm. Often this type of support needed will come in the form of an external coach. Firstly, because that person's leader is already busy with their role, and secondly, because their leader may not have the appropriate skills to be able to serve them appropriately. Today, more and more organisations recognise that their success comes down to the adoption of more creative leadership paradigms, many of which recognise the importance of development and engagement of your teams, and this means offering them the appropriate scaffolding to support their development. So what do I need to take away from investing my time over the last few minutes? Leadership development is a process of change in which your aim is to enable an individual to learn a new set of skills, manage a greater complexity in their thinking, and change their behaviour. It can be challenging for people to persist with a changed or new behaviour. Under pressure, we often revert back to a previous normal state or to a series of behaviours we're more comfortable with to either get the work done or to fit in. The organisation or environment is shaped by the dominant values, beliefs, attitudes and behaviours of either those with the greatest degree of influence or the expectations placed upon its leaders. If the new or changed behaviour doesn't fit the norm, the individual will likely experience pressure, whether it be direct or indirect, to operate in the status quo. The best way to ensure changes within the environment is to have the appropriate support from leadership, which means not just leadership development, but an approach of post-learning structured support to embed and demonstrate new behaviours. I hope you've found the last few minutes to be a beneficial use of your time. With the right support after a leadership development program, you'll begin to see beneficial changes from those you invest in and begin to spread throughout the organisation. If you want to talk about how to support the development of talent or how to build a culture of leadership through coaching within your organisation, please do reach out. Until we speak, I wish you continued success and have an outstanding day.